On the 6th, my daughter had a birthday. So what we do on birthdays is we take the family and we go out and eat. Like we went to Malawi's Pizza. And, while we were there, our old home teacher from about 5 years before was there. And he was the one that talked with my wife and I and said, you know, when he turned 55, he and his wife ran a marathon. And this was like 4 years ago. And I thought, I'm turning 55 this year. We ought to do it. And so, my wife and I, we trained for it. And we're really slow. Our goal was to beat the police cars who closed down the marathon in 6 hours. That's how aggressive we are on our goals. But the week before the marathon, and this was St. George, the week before the marathon was state conference. And so he and his wife sat by us. And so they were giving us, all the advice that people give you, when you're running your first marathon and things like that. And so it was really neat. They gave us some suggestions and experiences. Watch out for the hill at mile 7. You guys have already been through that. And that was on Sunday. When we left on Friday, we found out that she was diagnosed with cancer, with blood cancer. So my wife and I, we remembered her in our prayers over the weekend. We ran the marathon, we did. We basically made it under just barely under 6 hours. But when I came back to school on Monday, I found out that she had passed away. And it was that quick. On our way home, we were listening to conference talks. And it was Elder Uchtdorf who said this. He says, if we devote ourselves to the pursuit of worldly wealth and the glitter of public recognition at the expense of our families and our spiritual growth, we will soon discover, soon enough, that we have made a fool's bargain. The righteous work we do within the walls of our homes is most sacred. Its benefits are eternal in nature. It cannot be it cannot be delegated. And so my thought today is that if we can keep our priorities in order, if we can do the important things first. And there was a form here that said we need to live the best we can because we do not know how long that will be. So it was fun talking with our home teacher. He's still single. He's a good man. And every time I see him, I thank him for the wonderful examples that he and his wife set. But we don't know how long it will be, so we just live the best we can. Okay. Housing. Let me start with an email. Says, hi, Professor. I took your 418 class last semester. I'm about to graduate and start a job at Dell at the end of the summer in corporate finance. My wife and I are excited to move on with life. We're starting to consider when we want to buy our first house. We know rates are low and will probably continue to be pretty low for the next little while. Also, since we're living in Texas, buying a good-sized starter home at low cost is very doable. Renting will probably be about as expensive as a mortgage will be each month. We want to have a good down payment, however, to avoid PMI and have a smaller mortgage. Do you recommend renting for a while to have a full 20% down payment, or what is the best route, do you think? Thanks for your thoughts and advice. Okay. You rent till you get that PMI? Or do you? Well, we'll let you think about that. As we today finish the home buying process. Assuming we can get our screen up. Oh, yes, it's coming. So we talked about, the first one was know your limits. And number 2 is find your home. So we'll just kind of take you through this process here. 6-step process. What's important to you? To develop a plan. Once you're serious, get a home inspection. Determine any covenants, CCRs, covenants, something in restrictions, or potential loans, and negotiate the home price. So the first one is determine what's important to you. I think I told you the story. Our first house my wife and I were in, we worked 3 Saturdays a month for basically 3 years. So needless to say, when we luckily, when we sold the house, luckily we had put the work in. We figured out that I think I made about 25 cents an hour for all the time we spent. That's probably what I'm worth too. But the point is, at least we sold it. And so what do you think we wanted on our next house? We wanted something that we didn't have to work on. I told you the story about how the market was just crazy. And so we decided we wanted something with a little bit bigger room for our kids. And we'd buy a house, we'd look at a house in the morning, by the afternoon we sold. This was roughly 1990. And we'd see something in the afternoon, by the morning we sold. So we finally found a house we liked that had enough bedrooms for our 3 kids, 3 soon to be 4 kids. And we made an offer on it, and then we realized that it was on the top of the hill. And then if my kids kicked the ball off, it would be almost a half a mile before the ball stopped. So figuring out what's important to you here. What will be it? Location, home style and layout, number of bedrooms. But figure out what you need. And this is an important part. Realize if you're like the average family, you move between 5 and 7 years. And look at your future plans, work, school. My preference has been closer to schools and places like that, just because that's been good for us. Number 2 is you develop a plan and build your team. Once you know your limits that we talked about on Thursday, we know where you want to be. We know what you can afford. You've already been pre-qualified. Then you start driving around. I like Zillow.com, which is a nice resource. It gives you the assessed value, not the market value, but at least it gives you some ideas on where you are. And then be patient. Realize, a lot of people, I hear this a lot, if you rent, you're just throwing your money away. I've heard that a lot. People don't realize that you have to make 6 to 7% just to break even with realtor's fees. That's the realtor fee to sell the house. So realize, and then on top of that, you've got all the landscaping, and you've got all the other things. I was at a lane meeting last night, and at the house we were at, the wife came in and says, "Oh, you need to look up here. There's a bubble forming." And apparently there was an ice dam, and the water came into the house. So you own a house. There are a lot of costs that go with it. So you'll be in the house for years. Don't make the decision too quickly.
So when you say 6 to 7%, you just say the house needs to appreciate 6 to 7%?
Just for you to break even on that. So if you pay $200,000 for the house, the realtor's fee on that is roughly $14,000. So if you don't sell for $214,000, you're losing money on that. So things like this. So often renting a luxury apartment for 6 months is a good idea to give you time to search where you might want to.
Why do you say luxury apartment?
It's just a nicer apartment, something better than you had as college students. Do your homework. Realize who are the realtors working for? They're working for the sellers. Who pays them? The sellers. Now, a buyer's broker, as the size of the house gets a little bit big, you might want to go with a buyer's broker. Who pays a buyer's broker? You do. But they have a fiduciary responsibility to you. Take matters in your own hand. Internet, other tools. And the key is just be ready. Realize your most important negotiating tool is to walk away. And so never get so excited on a house that you can't walk away. Get lots of good help. Buyer's broker, an appraiser, attorney. Things like that. Then we have a home inspection. Once you found a home you like, you can afford it, have a home inspection. What you don't want to do is you don't want to buy other people's properties. When we moved, when we were thinking about buying this house, we told the person we wanted to, we were interested in the house. We told him it would be contingent on a home inspection, and he didn't want to allow us to do a home inspection. I said, fine, no home inspection, we're walking. After that, he thought, okay, I'll let you do a home inspection. But a home inspection makes sure that you're not buying other people's problems. To give you an idea of how detailed they are in the home inspections, here's just our home inspection report if anyone's interested in taking a look at it. But they're extremely detailed. And these guys are good. They can't go in walls and things like that, but they spend an important amount of time.
How much do they do?
Generally, probably between $300 and $700, depending on the size of the house. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to buy other people's problems. I've heard stories of people moving into a house, not doing a home inspection, and 3 weeks later, the water heater explodes and goes out on them, and all of a sudden they've got $6,000 worth of damage plus the water. And so it's important that you don't buy someone else's problems. And you can make your offer contingent on a home inspection. Now, the person thought we were doing a home inspection to reduce the price, and I told them that's not the case. But be wise in what we do. Look through your, if you're buying a house in a neighborhood, look through the covenants, conditions, and restrictions for a potential house. They can be quite restrictive. Where I live, you have to bring your garbage cans in and everything. There's just some things there. It's a wonderful place to live. But make sure you understand what those CCRs. Condos and townhomes, make sure the amount of transfer setup fees. Also understand any homeowner/association fees, because these can be substantial. So realize it's not just your principal and interest payments. You've got your principal and interest, you've got your escrows, you've got your down payments, and then you've got any additional fees depending on where you're at. As you're looking at buying a house, you want to go through and you want to look at, records of utility costs and other monthly expenses. Compare those to your current costs. We looked at this one house, and the utility costs were over $1,000 a month. Can you imagine that? Just to say that wasn't a house that we were very used to. And realize the costs will vary depending on the season. So if you're looking in summertime, expect them to increase substantially. If you're looking in wintertime, they'll probably be a little bit easier. But make sure those are consistent with your budget. Okay. So once you know what your limits are, you found a home you like, and realize, be creative in finding the home. Once you found the home right, then you want to use the best resources you have to negotiate the price for the home. Again, your best negotiating technique is walking away. It is a negotiating process. Realize that most things are negotiable. Closing costs, to a large degree, are negotiable. Things like this. Things that need to be fixed. Other things can all be part of the negotiating process. So when I sold the house, we had to do, in Arlington, Virginia, we had like $5,000 worth of termite damage that we had to do. But there are certain things that have to be done before you can sell the house. But make sure most of the other things are negotiable too. And then you negotiate the loan. This is the final process. Number one is a three-step process. Number one, understand the lending process. Number two, choose multiple lenders to compete for your business and get good faith estimates from each other, from each lender. Why do you want to use multiple lenders?
They'll probably have different fee structures.
Different fee structures.
Find the best one.
Didn't find the best one. Do you necessarily have to go with the best one? Or can you take the best offer to the one you like the most and say, if you can beat it by 1/8 of a point, I'll go with you? Again, kind of all of these things, but that's what you want to do. The key is information. The key is to find the best one. Take the various loan offers from the lenders to calculate your lowest effective interest rate that we talked about. Phoebe.
So when I was talking to you, said that one of the best ways to find the effective interest rate without points is just to say, what would the loan be without any points when you're talking to the loan?
Right, so if there's no points and no fees, then in that case it would just be your APR.
Right, so in order to, instead of doing that, do those calculations, just to get right to the rate and
Yeah,
just that.
I would actually take my calculator, take my computer with the Excel, just so I can check and make sure that it's right. Because there's other fees in addition to those. And then negotiate with your best lender the best rate. So here's the process. So you found a home that suits your lifestyle using your resources such as a realtor. Do you have to use a realtor? I would use a realtor at least to make sure you fulfill the covenants of the loan. He refers you to a mortgage broker. Do you have to use the mortgage broker the realtor recommends? And the answer is no. And broker pulls your credit, determines your need, tries to find lenders among the competition to meet those needs. And then each lender has unique programs. Lender and broker negotiate points, rates, prepayment penalties, fees, other features of the loan. And here's where I actually recommend that you go with multiple lenders. Broker recommends the best loan to the consumer, reviewing the features. Consumer makes the final decision. So here's where you pull out your spreadsheets and you calculate your lowest effective rate based on how long you plan to be in the home. Lender takes the loan, structures the loan, it finds any additional information. Broker, title, lender work to fulfill all conditions. Basically, sends the documents out and the loan's free. So right here, they can refer you to your mortgage broker. You use that, but then you find 2 or 3. You go talk to your friends. Find 2 or 3 others. Now, is there a risk that, if you've got 3 different people pulling your credit score, is that 3 different pulls on your credit report? No. There's actually a 90-day period there. Once that first mortgage report is pulled, that you can have any number of pulls and it's all considered a single pull. What about on day 91? It's considered a second pull. So realize you're the borrower. The mortgage broker actually puts you in touch with the lender. Yes?
Go back to that 90-day thing. So say you have, like we would do like credit restoration for people, and sometimes
Okay.
it would take a long time. So on day 91, do you have from 91 to day 180 that counts as just the second
That's
pull,
your second
or is
pull.
it okay?
I
So it's
think-
90-day periods.
I think that's the framework,
Okay.
from my understanding. So realize you're the borrower. The mortgage broker has this lender out. Do you know who the lender is? No, we don't. But what he does is the mortgage broker makes sure that you fulfill the requirements of the loan. Now, what does the lender do once he's got your loan? Does he hold it for 30 years? No. He actually sends it to an issuer, and the issuer bundles it together with all similar loans of similar quality, and he sells it as security. And then you've got a servicer here that basically receives your money and then hits the money to the issuer who pays the investors. So once the mortgage broker is done with you, will you ever see that person again? Probably not unless you redo your loan. So realize that they're there for a purpose. Your goal is to help them. Your goal is to get the lowest interest rate with the lowest points and the lowest back-end bonus. And we'll talk about this. But that's the process. And now I want you to choose multiple lenders. The ideal is to have multiple people compete for your business. And that way, if there's no one competing, how do you know if you've gotten a good deal or not? If you've got 4 different lenders and all of them are pretty consistent, you can have a pretty good sense. You want to get a good faith estimate from each lender. These are costs you'll likely pay. And then you can actually compare the good faith estimates from one broker to another and say, I've got this other good faith estimate here. And you're charging me $6,000 more than those. What's the concerns here? And then we calculate your effective interest rate. Get your base rate.
So as we're doing that and we're trying to go looking at multiple lenders, is that through like one broker and he shows us multiple lenders, or do we go through multiple brokers?
Actually what you do, do you have to go through a broker to find a lender? No, actually what I do is I just call my friends. People who have gone through this process before. I have a son-in-law who's a mortgage broker. I'm not advertising him. But and so word of mouth is a pretty good thing. And so as you talk with other people and you find out what kind of rates they got and what kind of points they paid and what kind of experience they had. So again, what's your indicator that you got the best rate? The lowest effective interest rate. And then the fewest points. So points, and we'll actually talk about this in a minute. And then once you've got 3 or 4, it's kind of like a story I told you buying the Hondas, that, do I really want to go up to Layton for a Honda? I find the best rate I can, and I go to the place, the broker that I like the best. And I'll say, hey, this is my best rate if you can beat it by 1/8 of a point. 1/8 of a point on $200,000, can that save you a little bit? Yeah. Now, do these mortgage brokers, if you don't do business with them, do they still get paid? The answer is no. So do they have incentive to want to work with you? And the answer is yes.
Question.
Okay. Oh, yes, sorry.
So
Matt.
with this, like if the report says that everything's okay and then something happens after you buy, are they liable? Or
No, they're not. They can't see through walls and they can't do, but they are extremely detailed. The person who did this actually had his computer, had his camera, basically a software program, he would go in and take pictures on each of these things. And we actually, when he came in and did that, it had, the month before, it had frozen, and we actually had a pipe going out to the pool that had snapped. And when he walked out there, he was like, by the way, there's a 3-inch thing of water just going out of your pool. And so they do spend, it's very detailed about the things that they do. And then the last one is just to enjoy home ownership. Here's an interesting thing. Generally, it'll take 1 to 2% of the value of the home per year just to maintain it. And so we had water damage last year. We had washing machines go out. We had, I've got lots of people in my house. So when those things go out, it's not cheap. So realize you need to budget 1 to 2% of the home value. So if you're in a $200,000 home, you'll budget $2,000 to $4,000 just for upkeep. So you probably should put that into your annual budget. And my wife said this was a good idea here. A professional cleaning a few times a year can maintain a home value. My wife used to have someone come once a week for 4 hours and help her clean the house. And when we sold our house in Walnut Creek, people couldn't believe that there were 7 kids living there. Just because, that the house was really good. And so it can help you to maintain the value. Okay. Any questions on the process? Does that make sense? Do you see what we're doing? The principle is if we can figure out what we want, we can figure out what we can afford, figure out the things that are important to us, and then we're patient. Just like I teach patient investing, we're patient home buyers. And we wait till we find the house that we want.
You mentioned one time when you guys were buying a home that homes were getting bought every single day, and
Right.
you looked at it in the morning, in the afternoon. And this process looks like it takes a little bit of time. How long do you recommend?
What do you think?
actually
What
look?
kind of an environment are we in now? So that was 1990 when we moved to Walnut Creek. Are we in a buyer's market or a seller's market right now? Yeah, we're actually in a buyer's market. Back then was a seller's market. So we're in a buyer's market right now, and so I think the key really is just to take your time, figure out what's important to you. And we figured out what was important to us over time. At first, just getting into a house was important to us because it was all we could afford. Later, decided that we needed a house that had a little bit more room. It wasn't quite as old. It didn't need repair work every Friday. And then we decided we want something on a level cul-de-sac. And then we decided something with a view. So if you come to my house right now, you'll see we have a view. It's a level cul-de-sac, and it's got lots of room for lots of kids and grandkids now too. So you'll figure those things out as you go along. Okay.
Is there also, I was just curious if there's a time of year that more houses go on the market? Like my family was dealing with a realtor and they're looking for houses like over Christmas break. And they said more options will come on the market in like spring.
Why do you think more options come on the market in spring?
No one wants to move in the winter.
Pardon me?
You don't want to move in the winter.
Yeah, you don't want to move in the winter. Also, your kids are in school too. So generally what happens is after spring, after the school semester's over, there tends to be a lot more people moving in. Okay. Our second thing we wanted to do today is I asked for questions. I actually only got one question, but we'll show you the other ones here. And then we can decide whether we want to do it. So, what happens? Good credit marries bad credit, prepayment, lowdown on buying down. About, should we be buying down? How do I make sure brokers give me what they promise, percentage? Can I turn it off? So let's just go through this, and then if we decide we want to answer the question, the first 6 or 8, there's like 25 questions. But we'll just kind of go through it. If we decide we want to do it, we'll just kind of skip through it. So my point here is to really answer the questions. So let's start. How do mortgage brokers get paid? And so the principle here is stewardship. If we can understand how people are paid, then we can know how to use that to our advantage. Realize they're out to provide a service and to make money. They work with similar lenders with similar rates. Do you think you'll have one lender out here requiring 3% and another one over here requiring 7%? Do you think the rates will be that different? Or do you think most lenders are, rates are pretty similar? And they are done with you after the loan, there's no follow-up. So our goal is to minimize the interest rate received with the fewest discount points. Now, do we all know what discount points are? So I'll give you 3.5% with no points. If you pay 1 point, I'll give you 3.25%. If you pay 2 points, I'll give you 3%. So those are discount points. You're discounting the interest rate. So they make money 3 ways. And first 2 I think we're familiar with. Origination fees. Most origination fees is like 1 point. So that's really where they make most of the money. They also make discount points, which are payments you make to lower the interest rate. What people don't realize is there's also a back-end bonus. So let's say the lenders require 3%. If you as the mortgage broker bring them someone who's willing to pay 3.25%, they only require 3%. So they will give the mortgage broker a back-end bonus because they brought in a rate lower or higher than what's required. So again, there's a relationship between the discount you pay and the broker's back-end bonus. So we want to minimize the discount, the discount points. We want to minimize the points. We want to minimize the interest. And we also want to likely reduce the broker's back-end bonus. Because we want to borrow as close to that lender's rate as possible. So does that make sense?
Why do you want to minimize the discount points? Because doesn't that minimize your
interest rate? But what we want is the lowest effective interest rate. And do you know how long you're going to stay in that class? We don't know how long. So ideally, the fewer points you have, the fewer you have to allocate, and hopefully the lower the rate.
Quick question.
Yes?
What's the difference between just paying a bigger down payment and paying points?
The down payment just really goes to the amount you actually have to borrow. The discount points relates to the interest rates.
But it's a lot better usually just paying a bigger down payment, right?
Yeah, well, the nice thing about paying a bigger down payment, if you pay 20%, you don't have private mortgage insurance. And that, like I said, that could be $100-200 a month.
That's a standard, like across the board.
Yes, 20%. But it varies a little bit depending on the type of loan. How do I estimate the lender's required rate of return for mortgage loans? Any thoughts on that? If that's what we're trying to see, how do we figure out what that is? Here's the thought. Brokers' earnings are a function of origination fees, discount points, and back-end bonus. So find out how low they'll let you buy down. Let's say, if they'll say, okay, you can buy down for 3 points, we'll give you 3%. There's a chance that that's pretty close. So what's the maximum they'll let you buy down to? And if they say 3%, that may be close to the lender's rate. Because could you buy down below the lender's rate? And the answer is probably no. So use this information in your negotiations. So we talked about this in here. So any questions on how do mortgage brokers get paid? It is origination fees, it is discount points, and it is the back-end bonus. And our goal is we want them to get paid, but we want them a fair payment, and we need to make sure that we're concerned. Question here is, how do you know when to refinance? Any thoughts?
It's low.
Pardon me?
And the rate's lower than
When the rate's lower. But there's a lot of other things besides just the rates. Yes?
You have to have a slight idea of how long you're going to be in the house. You
Yeah.
calculate how long you break even on the fees.
Yeah, so you have to know how long you're going to be in the house and how long it's going to take you to break even on the fees. Would it be nice to have a tool to allow you to do this? Yeah. So again, stewardships. What are the costs you would pay before refinancing and the costs you would pay after refinancing? Calculate an internal rate of return on your savings. Again, takes into account the time value of money. Calculated break even and total cost analysis. So we actually do 3 different types of analysis. So here's the calculate. Current monthly interest and principal costs. Refinance monthly interest and principal costs. And then any monthly savings from the refinance. We also want to know any new costs that we have to pay. Do we have to pay a prepayment penalty? Do we have to pay additional origination fees and things like that? So include all new costs that will be incurred, taking into account the new loan. You know, and then also note anything that's the same for both loans, escrow, reserve accounts, you probably don't need to include. So, we use 3 different types of analysis for refinancing. The first one uses a time value of money. The second 2 are kind of more informational. If it's reasonable, then you do it. If only one calculation that makes sense, I probably wouldn't do it. So well, let me tell you why we put this together. Beginning of the semester, things get pretty crazy, and I hate to admit, but this was about 3 or 4 years ago. I didn't get to my voicemails. So finally, after about 3 weeks after school started, I finally could breathe enough. You guys know I teach a lot. Breathe enough where I could get to my voicemails. And I got this voicemail from this elderly gentleman who said, you know what, guy's coming over and he wants me to refinance the loan, and he kind of gave me the details on it. He said, I'm trying to figure out whether I should or not. Doesn't feel too good, but I'd like to know if you could give me a little hand on it. And so, needless to say, I got his number and I started thinking about the questions. And so I actually went through and did a total cost analysis based on the information that he shared. And I found that he would actually pay more with his refinance than he would without refinancing. I calculated what his fees were. You know, the additional fees of the refinance is what killed him on it. I calculated his total payments. If he didn't refinance, his total payments if he did. And I actually did that, and I found out that, you know, he probably shouldn't refinance. So I called him up. I says, well, I want you to know, based on the analysis that you give me, I don't think it's a good idea. And he says, well, he says, that's nice. He says, because I, you know, talked to the broker the other day, and he says, I didn't feel good about it, so I didn't do it. And then I went through and showed him the rest of the analysis. But that's how it's useful for us. We actually can help people who make these decisions. So let's talk about the first method, is internal rate of return. So what you'll do is you'll calculate all costs and fees for the loan. Those are your outflows. Your inflows would be your monthly savings, and then the number of new months savings. Now here's a note. If you're refinancing, I know a lot of people say, well, look at your savings. You know, they've had a loan for 15 years, they're refinancing, but what are they refinancing back to? They're refinancing to a 30-year loan. So whenever you do refinancing, always do the analysis based on the same number of months of the same loan. Because of course you're going to have a lower rate if you got 15 years left on this one, and now you've got 30 years on the refinance. And that's the thing you don't want to do. You don't want to keep making your mortgage payment so it's going to take another 15 years or another 15 years. Ideally, you want to set some goal. In my case, in my wife's case, our goal was by 45 we wanted to have our house paid off. So I think we did it like 42. I was the slow one in my family. But figure out some goals that are important to you. So you set your present value to minus your all costs and fees. Your payment is your savings, and is your number of months until the remaining on the loan, and solve for IRR. And if your IRR is greater than your risk-free rate, then refinance. So what would be your risk-free rate right now? 4%. So it's not a bad benchmark. You could also do break-even analysis again. All new costs and fees, savings and principal and interest. And we're going to do a case in just a minute. So all your new costs by your monthly savings gives you your break-even. If your break-even point is less than 4 years, and you think you're going to be in the house for those 4 years, I'd probably do it. If it's 5 to 7 years, it might be considered. If it's greater than 7 years, I'd be careful. Because most of you will move after 7 years. And then here's the one I did with this gentleman here, is I just calculated how much would he pay if he didn't take out the loan. How much would he pay if he did take out the loan? And so if your new costs and fees plus any refinance principal and interest costs are less than your current, it may make sense. If it's equal to your current, it may not. If it's greater, then it doesn't make sense. And what we found in his case is it didn't make sense. So grab your calculator. So Steve's got $150,000, 30-year, 6% loan. He's paid on it for 10 years. He still owes $125,529. He's looking to refinance. He's found this 5.25% loan. So I'd like you to calculate all three types of refinance analysis. The IRR, the break-even, and the total cost analysis. Should he refinance that way? Remember how we do it? So first of all, I'll just put some numbers up there. We can do this on an annual basis. Let's do it on a monthly basis, probably better. Someone want to take me through it? Do it another minute. Give me one more minute. Okay, so let's kind of go through this. So IRR analysis. So first thing was we calculate total cost. What's the cost of the refinance? Cost of the refinance? Yeah, $4,000. What's the next thing we do? What are the payments on it? What's the old payments? What are the old payments? What are the new payments? So our savings is $53.46. So how do we set this? How do we set the analysis? What's the IRR on this? Months on the new loan. Now, why do we set the months at 240? Because it's the same out there. So we set our savings, the cost, minus 4,000. Our payment is the savings, and is 240. We solve for I. We get a 1.27 times 12, a 15.3% IRR. Would it be a good idea to do here? The answer is yes. Let's do the second one. Break-even analysis. Again, here's our costs. Number 2 is our monthly savings, that $53. We divide our costs by that. We get 6.2 years. Good payback or bad? Not great. And then we'd also do that total cost analysis here. So, costs and fees for the new loan. Here's our principal and interest. Here's without refinancing. Here's our costs. So we've got $207,000 versus $215,000. So over the life, they'll save about 20 years. They'll save about $9,000. So what would you do? 2 of the 3 look good. I'd probably. Are there tools we could use to help us here?
Professor Sudweeks?
Yes.
Question on the IRR. I just don't feel like I understand the intuition behind that.
Okay.
These
So
experiments-
what you figure out is all of your costs are the outflows. So anything we have to pay out of pocket is the outflows. The inflows would be the savings from the lower interest rate of the refinance.
So when we found the 15%, what did that mean?
So we've got $4,000 in fees. So we're going to allocate those $4,000 over those 240 months. We make $53 a month on the savings. So if your $4,000 your outflow, your inflows are 53, basically $54 a month. What's the IRR that relates that 4,000 outflow to the 5,300 a month inflow of payments? So remember, your IRR is the rate that makes the present value of that 0. So as long as that IRR is greater than your risk-free rate, in our case here, we said the risk-free rate was 8%, and it would be a big deal. Yes?
So I was wondering, why do you recommend doing a break-even analysis like that instead of plugging that also into your calculator and just solving for n to a time value? Because I did that and it gets a little longer, it's like an extra year.
Yeah.
Is that like,
So I do break-even and total cost analysis are easy to explain to people who are not finance majors or business majors. And so the logic there, sometimes I do things just because it's easier to explain. Here's teaching tool 19, that's the one we did before, but there's a refinance tab here that's kind of a fun one. I know it's not a good theoretical answer, but it's a good teaching answer. So I'm going to come over here to refinancing. And again, here's that problem here. Here we owed $125,529. So we had $4,000 in costs. So you can write all of your costs here, and I just did it easy. And I just give you some ideas there. Here is, okay, what we put in, here's our interest rate. Here's the original months of the loan. Here's months to repay. And then here's our APR. Here's our fees and our APR on that new loan. And you can actually see out here to the side, internal rate of return, 15.3 greater than required return, yes. Break-even analysis, 6.2, yes. Total cost analysis will save $9,000, yes. So again, what we're trying to do is give you tools here to help you make that decision. And that's all these are. Okay, questions on refinance? Yes?
For the risk-free rates, you come up with that by comparing the interest rate for the bond?
Kind of what could you make? What are you making on your portfolio, kind of your bonds and things like this? What's kind of the general risk-free rate? What would you say the risk-free rate right now is? Like 2 to 3%. So it's kind of an art. Actually, most people don't have to decide what their risk-free rate. Just look at the IRR for what's reasonable and use it. But in finance theory, we like to put in that risk-free rate. It gives us a benchmark from which we operate. So what happens when good credit marries bad credit? So our goal, what's We want to get the cheapest way of getting the financing we want, so we can pay the lowest interest on our school. And really, you've got 5 options. Buy the house as co-owners and co-borrowers. However, if one person has poor credit scores, that could lower your rate. Number 2, good credit, buy the house alone. That may not be the case. It may be the spouse that has the good credit. Have good credit, buy the home using a no income verification mortgage. No, what they call liar's loans. That's probably not available. Third party with good credit, replace the bad credit as the co-borrower. You know, have a parent or someone co-sign, improve bad credit score. So we'll just talk about each of those. Co-owners and co-borrowers, you know, the downside here is you're paying a lower rate. So this is ideally what we want to avoid. Good credit, buy the house. Preferred option, it may limit the size of the loan to the income that good credit can support. So the big thing here is don't buy a house on 2 incomes when you know you'll drop to 1 income in the future. It's a recipe for disaster. Again, I told you the story of the other professor. He says, take your shoe off and pound it on the table. You know, I joke, and it's actually pretty seriously, I say the 2 big mistakes we've made since coming here was number 1, buying too big a house, and number 2, getting a dog. But, you know, and if I had it to do over, I would. I mean, it's not, our house is paid for and things like that, but we don't, you know, still, we still have 7 people in the home. So, but still, I think those are the decisions I would have changed. Of course, my wife would not have changed the one on the dog, so guess what? We still have the dog. 3, good credit, buy the home, no income verification mortgage. The downside on these is they're not as available, and they require almost 25 to 30% of down payments. So those are harder to get. And realize the assumption is if you put 30% down, how likely are you going to be to walk away from that loan? Probably not very likely. Number 4, third party with good credit, replace bad credit as the co-buyer. Generally, only a parent would be able to do this, and my kids actually know that we will not co-sign for them. You know, we've already had an experience where one of our children asked us to co-sign an auto loan, and I thought, you know, wait a second, if the lender doesn't think you can pay it back based on that, well, why do I think that I know more than the lender? Because I'm your dad. So we said no, but be aware. And then the last one, improve bad credit to credit score. And we talked about these. Bad credit on joint accounts with a good credit spouse. Call bank to increase available credit for bad credit and reduce percentage usage. Have bad credit, and you pay your bills twice a month to reduce the amount used. You know, just ideas that you guys came up from on the section on credit. Okay, questions on mortgage?
So if I were to buy a house with just my name and not my wife's name, would that be like on the title of the house or just on the mortgage itself?
It would be on the mortgage itself.
Okay, so the house would sell both names.
Would still be in both your names. I believe. Someone want to correct me on, I'd come across that question.
How does that affect divorce if you just own the house?
Generally what happens is both of you, I don't know the answer to that. Sorry. I can look into it if you'd like. What about prepayment penalties? What should I know? Realize you need to, the principle of stewardship, you need to understand what you're getting into before you sign the loan payments. Generally, mortgage lenders don't require a prepayment penalty on a first mortgage. A second or a third, they do. And realize too, if mortgage brokers get a prepayment penalty, they make more money. So it's important for you to understand it. So make sure there's no prepayment penalties on each of these. And there's really 2 kinds. Soft and hard prepayments. Both have a stated period of time, 1, 2, 3 years, the prepayment penalties in effect. So you can't pay it off within the first 3 years or 2 years. A maximum pay down percentage, which is usually like 6% of the principal. Why do they have prepayment penalties? Are there a lot of upfront costs for a mortgage and loan? The answer is yes. So there is some room here. And then there's some prepayment penalty if you sell it before this certain period, usually 6 months of interest. So when we go a soft prepayment, you can't refinance at all. You can't refinance at all, you can't sell it to a family member, and you cannot pay down more than your maximum pay down percentage each year. So the only way is to get out of a soft prepayment is to sell it to an unrelated party. With a hard prepayment, you just can't get out of it at all. So realize the prepayments are important. Again, on the first mortgage, there should not be a prepayment penalty. Make sure when you sign the documents that there is none. How about the lowdown on buying down? Remember we talked about these points? How do we know? Well, here's the stewardship. Principal stewardship. How long are you actually going to be in the house? And so, when it comes to the lowdown on buying down, there's a couple of ways that we do it here. Two different analysis. One is internal rate of return, very similar to what we did before. So calculate all costs for the loan, the monthly savings, determine the months of the month savings, and then calculate your IRR. And again, this one here is, again, your break-even analysis. Take the new cost divided by your monthly savings. And again, under 4 years, good idea. 4 to 7, I'd be careful. Greater than 7, I kind of think. So before you pay for points, ask yourself this question: are there better things I could do with that money? Remember, if you pay 1 point and you're paying all the costs out of the loan, if it's a $200,000 loan, you just agreed to borrow not $200,000 but $202,000. And what could you do with that? You could pay down higher interest rate debt. You could save for retirement. Tax eliminated the deferred account. You could build your emergency fund. There's a lot of things here. Okay, another case. So you've got 6% 30-year mortgage for a new house. You can tell these cases are old because of the 6% rate. It's like 3.5% now. So offers 6% with one origination point. You can buy down the loan to 5.5% with one additional buy down point. So loan B is 2 points, but for $252,000. His risk-free rate is 8%. So realize when you do that additional point, you have to borrow more money. So what's the IRR and break-even analysis for loan B? You know what? I hate to say this. I'm gonna take you through this case just because I have a lot more things to talk about. I hope you don't mind. So let's just kind of go through the analysis here. Monthly payments for both loans. So our first one is $1,498. Second one, $1,433. So what's our savings? About 25 bucks. Wait a second. That should be 65 bucks. Cost of your discount points, 25, so basically 25.51. So if we take your IRR minus 25.51, we're saving 52, solve for I, and 12 months, so we get an IRR of 11.4%. Would that be a good idea? The answer is yes. Okay, break-even analysis, again, we'll do the same thing here. Loan A, loan B was this, our monthly savings, I think that's 1473 is the right number. I had it wrong there. Cost of the discount points, basically 25.51. So we divide those two. So 8.5 years, that might not be. And so, kind of the recommendation, 11.4, higher than their 8%. And to break even analysis of probably 8.5 years. Is that greater than 7 years? I probably couldn't do it. You know, but again, there's room for judgment here. Okay. Again, I'd come back here. Learning tool, we just come back here. Buying down points. Here's our 250,000, 6% at 360. 1498 versus there, and then here's our beginning, here's our interest rate, 2 points. So now what we have to do is, let me check my numbers here. So IRR is 19%. Break-even point in years is 62.9. 5.25 years until in that case I probably would do it. So just more tools that help you in the process. How do you get the best deal with mortgage brokers? Again, basically, work with a number of brokers, research the reputation, and check with the Better Business Bureau. So, beware of the bait and switch. What's the bait and switch? Someone comes in and says, okay, you can get 3.25% interest. You go in, well, yeah, you can get 3.25%, but it's 3 points. So, hold them accountable for their closing and other costs by seeing the complete, not a summary good faith estimates. Make sure they give you a complete good faith estimates. There are some people who say, well, I can't give you the good faith estimate until we sign the documents, and that's incorrect. The other thing, you want to see what's called their rate lock commitment sheet. And that says that they've actually locked you into that account to make sure it's consistent. If they won't show you that rate lock commitment sheet, you go with someone else. And what about those who advertise no closing costs, no origination fee? Generally, they'll add it to a processing fee. They'll either raise the interest rates or they'll add it to the cost of the principal. So there are costs to processing loans, so be aware there. And if your lender promises a short turnaround, 7 to 14 days, confirm that their underwriter's in the same state. So if you've got an underwriter that's in Sandy, it's a lot easier than if your underwriter's in New York. So beware. How much of a down payment should you make? What do you guys think?
At least 20%.
At least 20%. And why?
So you avoid PMI.
Yeah, PMI. And again, ideally, you want to first fulfill the covenants of the loan. Second, make sure you have an adequate emergency fund after all closing costs. And it's nice to have a buffer the first few years. Once you have a buffer, then you can kind of go back and pay down additional funds. But realize, I recommend you both save for retirement and pay down the loans on your house first. Why wouldn't we just want to take all 20% and pay down the loan?
Well, if you don't have any kind of emergency fund and an emergency happens, then
You lose the house, regardless of how much principal you have on it too. Also, is a mortgage and student loan, are those debts pretty low cost? Yeah, you're probably paying 3.5, plus it's all the interest is tax deductible, so you're probably paying about 2. So I like people to pay off your student loans and your mortgage payments within your 80%. And then on your 20% that you save for long-term goals such as retirement, missions, education, and things like that. Should you pay off the loan early? Yeah. And I recommend it. I like paying off the loan early. But again, when my wife and I did this, we continued to pay our 20% into missions and educations and retirement. And is it a nice feeling now to know I still have 4 kids in the home and their education's paid for? It's a nice feeling to know that their missions are paid for. And the answer is yes. And nice feeling to know that my wife and I can retire anytime we want and do whatever the Lord wants us to do because we've saved for that, yes. So there's a lot of peace that comes with that.
What you say, even if you don't pay the 20% down payment on the home, once you get to 20%, does that insurance come off?
Right, if you, not automatically. So let's say you put 10% down. What you want to do is you want to watch what housing prices in your area are, and you also want to try to pay things down. Once you think you're at 20%, you have to pay for an appraisal of the house. Once that appraisal comes in, you have more than 20% equity, you send that to your mortgage servicer and they will eliminate the PMI. Assuming you don't have a FHA loan. If you've got an FHA loan, you have to pay PMI the entire life. 15-year or 30-year loan better? Yeah. My rule here is look at the interest rate differential. I generally, for most people, do a 30-year loan. How much more do you have to pay? Can you take a 30-year loan and pay it off in 15? Yeah, just by looking at the tools that we've given. Do you have to pay PMI? The answer is yes. If your down payment is less than 20%. Principles, we talked about this. How do you know whether to rent or buy? And again, just, there's some other things here. Realize in New York Times interactive rent versus buy calculator, there's a number of these on the net, and I just put this one here. But it only looks at monthly rent, home price, down payment, mortgage interest rate, and annual property taxes. Doesn't count on what you'd spend for appliances and landscaping, repair, all of these other things that are pretty expensive. How easy to refinance with an interest-only loan? Just very easy, just a similar type of loan. What's a short sell? Should we be concerned about short sells? What is a short sell? Pardon me? Yeah, you lose the house. Someone's selling the house for less than the amount owed. I mean, that's the thing here. Required to borrow, wishes to sell the property, a lender who's willing to do that. And the assumption is that the lender will probably make more from the short sell than he will taking the house into foreclosure and the risks and costs from that process. What it does not release the borrower from the obligation to pay the remainder. So if you have a short sell and there's a deficiency, you are still stuck there. Okay, a person's upside down in a mortgage. Can they? Well, I'm trying to get through these. We still have.
What's the implications of like the credit score to a short sale? You know?
It can have negative implications on it. I was talking to someone yesterday whose credit score was pretty well hurt because of they had to do a short sale.
Is it by like a certain amount of points, or is it just?
I don't know. He just said it. They did very quite substantial. You know, you're upside down in your mortgage. Can you still refinance? A lot of that depends. If it's all a first mortgage, then the answer is no. If you've got a first and a second mortgage, which has the higher priority, the first or the second? Actually, it's the first. And the first mortgage is significantly less than the market value in that. You might be able to do it. The first mortgage has first claim and it must be paid before the second. So just little things here. What do you think, purchasing distressed properties out of state? Bad idea. Was really that good a deal? I mean, I heard people that say, oh, come in, you can buy real estate for 80% off, retail costs. And we bought this house for, it's 5 years ago sold for $140,000. We paid $8,000 for it. Yeah, this is one of the worst areas. And realize these companies, if it was really such a good job, what they do is they buy things and then you buy them from them. If it was really that good of a deal, why wouldn't they just buy it themselves? Why would they let you buy it? And so you've got to ask yourself that question. Can you adequately maintain properties out of state? I think it's hard enough managing properties in your own city. Can you imagine the problems that would you do it out of state? And then realize most property management companies will take 50% of the revenues. So you have to have free cash flow on 50% of the revenue. So I would be really careful. If you move from your first house, do I recommend keeping it as a rental? A lot of it depends again. Can you sell it? Will the cash flow cover principal, interest, and maintenance costs after your property management fees? And again, property management fees are roughly 50%. Do you have the time and the patience to be a landlord? It's a ton of work in property management companies. Generally, I don't recommend it. So realize the principle I work with is diversification. Your house is probably your largest financial asset already. By buying more real estate, you're kind of overweighting real estate in your portfolio. And what you don't want to be is you don't want to be undiversified. The offered money is not accepted. Is the earnest money returned? And the answer is yes. What's your recommendation on your first house? Couple of things here. Condo, townhome, or single family. And it depends on three things. What about the area you're moving to? If you're moving to San Francisco, will that have an impact? So, how many miles are you willing to drive? Is there a mass transit that would make it easy to work and back? And is there a mass transit you'd be willing to take? And what's your commute time? my wife and I, my job was in San Francisco. I was at the Transamerica building. And we had to decide. And so what we did is we kind of figured out what's the maximum commute time I would get. And then we drove it during commute time and we found that I really didn't like commute time. So we figured what's the maximum amount. And I figured if I could get to Walnut Creek where they had 680-24 split, once I hit that split, it was even worse than that. And so we figured based on what my expected commute time was. Question 2, what's your budget? What's available in your price tag? Price range. Often that will determine the type of houses you can get. And number 3, and what are your preferences? Can you do the upkeep on a yard? Can you pay others to pay the outside, keep up the outside? Can you live with close neighbors? You know, that may be a challenge. Can you take the externalities? So I think if you answer these 3 things, you know, your choices might be limited. And then ask where's the appreciation the best. You know, in my experience, it's been more in single-family homes than condos and townhomes, just because of the extra costs. What type of account should I use to save for a down payment? Thoughts? Where would you put it? Would you put it in the stock market? No. You know, again, our goal is to preserve principal here. Investing to increase returns will increase risk and may not increase the returns overall. So just a couple of places. Money market funds, CDs, internet savings, bond funds with shorter maturities. If you're saving for more than 3 years, you might put a little bit, you know. But again, we'll talk about this when we get to the investing side. Should I purchase now when the market is low? I hear this now. We ought to go out and purchase now because the market's really low. What do you guys think? It depends. Again, understand yourself, behavior, your ability to forecast housing prices, and the financing process. Understand yourself. Do I really think this is the case? Is this an opportune time, or am I just using it as an excuse to buy now because I'm impatient? I've been living in this house with 3, you know, 2-bedroom house with 3 kids, and you know, for 4 years, and I'm dying. And maybe your spouse is dying too. Is it really as low as it's going to get, or could it possibly go lower? Financing, do you have the down payment? If you save more, can you get the PMI removed? So if we can answer those questions, I think we're doing better. How do you balance home size with the fact that your family will be growing? Thoughts? You can do like I did. You know, you have an unfinished basement. You can spend 3 Saturdays a month for 4 years. Not the most exciting thing again. Home size, larger houses are more expensive. Homes closer to the city will be more expensive farther away. Homes with less travel time to work are generally more expensive than homes with more travel time. So to basically understand, you can buy a large home to support your family. That may be more than you can afford. You can smaller home that you may have to move within 3 to 5 years, which is a possibility. And here's just a couple other things. You know, depending on how much equity you have, you might move in 3 to 5 years. You could buy a smaller home with an unfinished basement, and I've done that, and fixing the basement up or an attic up is an alternative. Things like that. Or you can buy a smaller home with a large lot, and you can later build on that. Be careful, good opportunity to learn additional home skills, carpentry, plumbing, electrical, expensive risks as well. I'm trying to save money and do some electrical at my work, and I put in this electrical outlet that I bought at Costco. I went down and I pushed the switch to turn the electricity back on, and pretty soon it just switched back. And you can say I wasn't very smart, so I pushed it back, and I just held it there. And all of a sudden my wife would scream, Brian, shut it off! And apparently I hadn't done a very good job on the electrical, and it was shorting out, and there was smoke coming from the electrical outlet. We even had the electrical was grounded to a stainless steel sink. To this day, there's still holes in the stainless steel sink from my wonderful electrical skill. And then, how about, here's the one question that came from this semester. Shouldn't I be investing instead of paying off my cheap home equity in student loan? So you realize too that I don't recommend you take all of your 20% and just pay down your home equity loan. I've heard people who wanted to do that. I actually think the first thing you do is you build your emergency fund. Our second priority would be to pay off high interest credit card auto consumer loans. Once I do those, once I got out, I would hit those really hard. I'd take my 20% and use those to pay that. But once I've got those paid off, then all I basically have is my student loan and my mortgage loan. Those are very low interest, especially when you take into account the tax shield on those. So I would take my 20% and I would use that to start saving for retirement, saving for mission, saving for education. Out of that 80%, I would continue paying off my normal mortgage payments, my normal student loan payments. And then anything else over and above that 20%, I'd probably put to my mortgage and my student loan payments. So I do this, here's my order I recommend. Again, your emergency fund first, consumer credit card auto debt second, continue to pay off student loans from your normal budget expenses, the 80%. And then I continue on there. So let me finish with an email. So today we've talked about a ton of stuff. I apologize, there's so much stuff, like the PowerPoint for today is like 90 slides, but there are questions that students have had, and so I think it's important. As Dear Professor Sudweeks, I wanted to give you an update on me and tell you a story. I graduated in December and got a job working at Honeywell in Phoenix. Been pretty diligent in trying to apply what I learned in your class, and I've been grateful for the things that you taught me. My wife and I decided we wanted to build a home, which is turning out fairly well. The financing, on the other hand, has been an interesting story. I would have been completely lost without the things I learned in your class. Here's the story. Our builder provides a $5,000 incentive for closing costs if we use a preferred lender. So when we signed the initial paperwork to start the building process, the salesman called the preferred lender to come meet with us that same day so we could get us pre-qualified. She gave us a quote of $7,500 for closing costs and prepaid, which means that we would pay $2,500 out of pocket at closing. It seemed a little bit high to me, but what do I know? Lesson one, I had to look elsewhere to get some comparisons. A friend referred me to another lender who quoted me $3,500. He wasn't a preferred lender, so I'd end up paying the full $3,500. I really liked this lender. He was an LDS guy and came highly recommended from a good friend of mine. Again, referrals. I felt like I could trust him, which apparently is important to me. Out of curiosity, I went back to the builder and asked if he would be willing to pay at least half of the closing costs if I chose not to use their preferred lender. Unfortunately, I was out of bargaining power by that time, and they declined. At the end of my conversation with the builder, the salesman asked if I had looked into the two other preferred lenders they recommended. Obviously, I hadn't done this, because I didn't know they existed. The second preferred lender quoted me $5,600. At this point, I decided that I refused to pay a dime of closing costs. The third lender quoted me $4,200, and he would use the remaining $800 to pay down the rate. I felt great around the third lender. Everything seemed to be coming together extremely well. I proceeded to get him all the information he needed to get the approval process started. Once approved, which didn't take long, he insisted that we move quickly because rates were still volatile. I agreed and said, great, send me a good faith estimate and we'll go from there. Instead of a good faith estimate, he sent a loan fee approximation worksheet that explicitly states in the fine print that it is not a good faith estimate and fees were subject to change. Bewildered, I shot back and asked him why he sent me an approximation worksheet instead of a good faith estimate. His response was, I can't send you a good faith estimate until we lock the rate and turn this into a real loan. That was a month ago, and I haven't talked to the guy since. Before your class, I didn't even know what a good faith estimate was, let alone that the lenders are required to give me one. When he told me he couldn't give me one, 35 red flags went up in my face, and he lost my business immediately. After the good faith estimate, I went back to the second lender I told you about, the one who's not a preferred lender. He was also upfront with me, and if it weren't for the builder paying closing costs, I would have gone with him. I told him the same story I'm telling you, and he decided to call the builder and see if he could be their fourth preferred lender. Less than 24 hours passed, and he's now officially a preferred lender. I haven't locked in the 8, but probably will this week. I'm now looking at full blank rate with zero closing costs, and I have a lender that I feel comfortable with. Well, on my way to saving that $1 million, thank you to all you do. Can't remember much of anything the bulk of the course I took at BYU, but I remember yours. Okay. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time. Sorry to keep you late.